Starting things off, over the years, the fight to legalize marijuana has intensified, especially in the field of medicine. In some parts of the world, patients are prescribed marijuana to help them deal with medical illness. The question now arises, should marijuana be legalized here in the United States? Our attorney and legal correspondent, David Lesch, is here to talk more about this issue, and it seems as though it doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't. You know what? Anytime, this is the 8th segment of the constitutional law series that I've been doing, and anytime you have the government use the Constitution to regulate your ability to buy certain things or use certain things or make certain things a crime, well, it becomes a constitutional law issue. And regulating the sale of marijuana and making it a crime is clearly something that the federal government has been trying to do for some time now. You look at the history of marijuana. Marijuana has been around, cannabis has been around since the 1600s when the Puritans brought it over to North America. Many of our founding fathers actually cultivated cannabis. George Washington, Benjamin Franklin used it. Hemp has always been used as something for in paper mills, not just in terms of smoking. So it's been around, and at some point, the federal government took it upon themselves to try and regulate you and I, our ability to use the product in such a way that might adversely affect society, okay? Well, how do they do that? Well, they're going to do that through certain provisions of the Constitution, and that is where the debate begins.
Whether it's constitutional or unconstitutional.
Well, whether the federal government even has a right to regulate the state's ability to regulate marijuana. Remember, you have a federal system and you have the state governments. Okay? The 10th Amendment gives the state the right to have its own police power, to police itself. New York can police itself. Federal government can't police New York. New York can police itself. But there are provisions in the Constitution which give the federal government broad power. And one of those provisions is the Commerce Clause. It's a clause. It regulates interstate commerce. It gives Congress the right to regulate certain things that go on. Whether it's overreaching or not is a matter of debate. And what Congress tries to do, it says, well, if you're going to be selling a substance that crosses state lines, we can take a look at it and we can regulate it. And certainly cannabis, marijuana, is regulated, trying to be sold by drug dealers or different drug companies over state lines. So we're going to come in here and we're going to make it a crime. Well, some of the states say, hey, back off. You know, what's happening in our state is our state. It's not your business to come in and tell us what we can or cannot do, whether you're going to make it a federal crime or not.
Well, how many states really are in favor of the legalization of marijuana?
Well, a lot of states are making obviously medical marijuana legal. Right? And many states are saying, look, if it's regulated in such a way that the doctors are prescribing it, we're not going to make it a crime. And Eric Holder, the Attorney General, has basically backed away from his stance on trying to go after some of these particular physicians for over-prescribing or abusing marijuana. Unless they can really see something's going on, they have other things to deal with, the federal government and the Attorney General's office, so they take a step back. However, the non-medical use, where just recreationally smoking, all the federal government says, hey, we're going to come in. We have a right to be able to do that. And there are always pros and cons just to the use of marijuana to begin with.
Right. So where does it stand for the recreational user? Because there are plenty pro-recreational users.
Okay, the pro-recreational users basically say, look, it's not hurting anybody. It's no different than alcohol. If you legalize it, you're going to take it away from the drug dealers anyway, because everybody else can be able to get it. The young people will pretty much won't use it as much because they know that it's legal, so they won't think they're going against the system. And really it targets, if you don't make it legal, well, you're really targeting African Americans and Latinos, because they're the ones who seem to be arrested more often than anybody else for the use of it. So there's a racial component also. So let's legalize it. Okay, on the other side, there have been studies that have been done most notably in 1985, that say that an area of the brain is adversely affected by the use of marijuana, number one. The second study, which is the most important study that the federal government relies on, is that if you begin using marijuana, it will lead to the use of other harder narcotics, right? Cocaine, heroin, etc. And you know that's bad because that leads to crime, and crime adversely affects society. Therefore, we have the right to come in and regulate. So it's a tough issue. It's a constitutional law issue, and it seems that many states are easing their restrictions.
Well, where does it stand now? I mean, yeah, you did say states are easing their restrictions, but technically in the courts,
it's a crime. It's a crime. It's still a crime. It might be a lower level misdemeanor or a violation, but it's still a crime, in New York especially. In certain states, it's not a crime. It's more of, they'll send you to drug treatment programs, you'll have to do community service. It's not necessarily considered to be a crime, it's more of the lowest level violation, similar to a traffic ticket, you understand? So it's different. But of course, if you're selling it in large quantities, well, that's drug trafficking, and immediately the federal government's going to come in there. But ultimately, for my purposes sitting here, the constitutional issue is always the same. It's balancing federal against states' rights, individual against society as a whole. It's always a constitutional balance here. And in, I think it was in 2005, this case came up before the Supreme Court, and they upheld the federal government's right to use the Commerce Clause to regulate marijuana sale and make it a crime. And you know, Clarence Thomas, in his dissent, basically said, hey, I don't think this was something that the founding fathers really envisioned when they created the Commerce Clause, that we want to regulate the ability of the farmers in the area to grow hemp and to be able to use it or not use it. I don't think that was a purpose. And Sandra O'Connor also said it was overreaching. But the majority did say, hey, you know what, it's, you know, we're going to allow Congress to use this as a way to regulate the sale or the use of marijuana. And it's a clear constitutional law question. And it's something that's, again, it's just whenever I come here and I talk about constitutional law issues, it's something that's not going to go away, which makes it very interesting for me to be able to discuss.
Supreme Court, we know, is the final ruling body. Is that it? Is it over?
That's it. That's what it's the United States Supreme Court that's the law of the land that decides what laws of Congress are constitutional or not constitutional. And they basically upheld Congress's right to regulate the sale or use of marijuana. And many people feel, hey, stay out of our business. Let each state decide its own use.
And can a state, now that this is done, can a state have it still?
States try to. You know, California tries to push the federal government away and basically says, look, you know, we're regulating medical use or non-medical use, certainly medical use. And the federal government has backed away. The Attorney General has not been using the laws that have been forth by Congress to prosecute a lot of what's going on with respect to medical marijuana. Strike those laws down. But with non-medical use, they still come in and they still, you know, they still stir the pot. And a lot of the states don't like that. They want the federal government out of their business. So
give us a quick commercial glimpse of what's coming up on today's verdict.
Today's verdict, we have a case. We have our next show is on HIV awareness next Tuesday night. At 6:30, we're going to have some very interesting guests coming up and talking about your rights. If you have HIV, vis-a-vis the government, vis-a-vis your employer, it should be a very interesting show. 6:30 live next Tuesday.